Here's another handy boat coat tip. What I'm doing, I'm making up a bezel for a temperature gauge for my refrigerator on the boat. I've laminated a piece of silky oak to oak, which is glued together with some Purbon. And the next step I'm going to do, I'm going to seal it with the boat coat. So I'm going to show you some tricks to speed up things and get a really good result that looks like varnish just using your boat coat. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to nuke our piece of timber. I'm going to get it hot. And the reason for that is it'll do two things. As it heats up, it's going to expel air and moisture. And the second one is it's going to set our epoxy off really fast. So I want to get in and get this finished today, and the way to do it, stick it in the microwave. Let's nuke it for a minute, and that'll be really hot by the time it's finished. Next step, I've poured 20 ml of boat coat, and I'm going to nuke that too. I want that just warm to touch because it makes it much more fluid, the hardener mixes into it easier, and it'll spread a lot easier with a lot less air bubbles. Alright, I've set the microwave on 5 seconds to give our boat coat a zap. I've just pulled our bezel out. It's almost too hot to touch. That's how hot it got. And that's great because as it cools down, it's going to want to draw in air and moisture. Instead, we're going to be punching boat coat in it, and it'll suck it in and make it really dense. And plus it'll set the boat coat off fairly fast, so I'll be able to put the next coat on in probably 15 minutes instead of an hour, hour and a half. So really neat way to speed up your process. Now if I've done this right, that boat coat will be, the resin will be just warm when I pull it out of there. And what we do, once we pull it out, we let it sit for at least the length of time it's in there. And yeah, I can feel that's got some warmth to it. It's just enough. Next step, we're going to add our hardener, and I'm using non-yellowing hardener, and I'm down at bench height, and that's important because you're at an angle, you'll overdose it or underdose it. And notice I'm just using a measure cup, and it's pretty hard to see this because I got resin over my mark, but I know where it is. So I just slowly top him up till we get to 30 mil. Whammo. There we are. And I just scrape back with a paddle pop stick until I expose the 30 mil mark. Oh, we could do it a little bit more. That's just there actually. So we're a little bit underdone. So we'll put a little bit more hardener in. Just a tad. If anything, be slightly shy on the hardener, because too much hardener cuts down on the tensile strength of your epoxy, and plus you're wasting hardener. Adding extra hardener won't set it off any faster. And then we're going to mix that in, but I'm going to add a little bit of TPRDA to that before I mix it in. The reason I'm going to add TPRDA is so that our boat coat is a little bit more fluid again. TPRDA is a very dilute form of resin. You add that at about 20%, so we just need a couple of drops in here. But it makes an amazing difference to how fluid it makes it. So mix him in, and then we'll put it
10 seconds later.
You know what I forgot to do, and I always do it, I forgot to put gloves on. So I'll put some gloves on. If you get caught out there on the track, white vinegar, that cleans your hands up really well. Don't use solvents because it defats your hands, and it'll go into your skin. And it can also be a cause of getting epoxy sensitivity and or solvent sensitivity. They're all the same. You become hypersensitized to chemicals, and the solvent, because the molecules are much smaller than the pores of your skin, they'll cause it to go in through your skin. And I've stopped cleaning cups and that. These measure cups, I let them dry out and crack the epoxy out of them. I used to wash it out with solvent, being the tight ass I am, and my hands, just using acetone, would start to go red after a while, and really tingly. I had to give it up. I just don't bother now. If I got a bit of liquid in there between coats, yes, I'll wash it out with the boat coat. But otherwise, I just let them dry out, or if they're too bad, throw them in the bin and start again. And I've stopped cleaning cups and that. These measure cups, I let them dry out and crack the epoxy out of them. I used to wash it out with solvent, being the tight ass I am, and my hands, just using acetone, would start to go red after a while, and really tingly. I had to give it up. I just don't bother now. I just, if I got a bit of liquid in there between coats, yes, I'll wash it out with the boat coat. But otherwise, I just let them dry out, or if they're too bad, throw them in the bin and start again. Now, notice I'm mixing well. I'm scraping around the corners. Always scrape around your edges. Pull it up through it, because if you're going to unmix the epoxy, it'll be in those corners. It's another reason to let it go off in the container, because that'll let you know very fast if you mix properly. Because if you've got any unmixed epoxy sitting down in those corners, when you pull the dried stuff out, you'll know you haven't mixed properly. So you need to put more effort into it. Now I'm just going to show you. See how we got bugger all air bubbles in that? Right? By warming your resin a bit, you end up with bugger all air bubbles in your epoxy. Right, away we go. We're going to coat. Now you'll notice I've got some plastic down here. I'm going to cheat something chronic today. Absolutely cheat. And that's the aim of this, is to show you how you can take shortcuts. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to coat inside our bezel first and the bottom of it. And epoxy won't stick to plastic. So I'm going to sit this down on the plastic after I coat the bottom of it. And who gives a damn with the liquid on the bottom? Yeah, it'll seal it. And we'll just sit him down and away we go. Oh, this is drawn in beautiful. Look at the grain come out in that. Looks magnificent. No air bubbles, because what's happening, the timber's cooling down as we go, and it's wanting to draw air in, not expel it. So there's another tip to keep air bubbles out of your epoxy. If you can warm up, stick your job out in the sun, stick it in the microwave for little things like this before you do your first coat, you'll end up with something that's Mickey Mouse. Now, by the time we finish this, we'll have something that'll look like varnish. And I'll show you a couple other tips when we get into our second and third coat too. I might even do it here, just to make sure we've got no air bubbles, because there are a few really fine ones on the surface. But what I'll do, I'll mist some metho over it in about 10 minutes time. Notice we've got quite a bit of boat coat left over. I'll go and find something to put that on. I hate wasting the stuff, so I normally have packing boxes and that we pack all our gear in to go to shows hanging around, and we'll pack it in that. Notice we've got some boat coat hanging around the bottom. We'll cut that out after it's cured. And if you look, there are some air bubbles there, but I'm not worried about them. We'll hit that with a metho and it'll look like $1 million. And that's as easy as it is. I reckon that'll be gelled and ready to put our next coat on in 10 to 15 minutes. Right, this fella's been sitting there for about 5 minutes now. Notice how the epoxy's drawn right down in. There's hardly any gloss there. Looks like there could be a few air bubbles there. So I'm going to hit it with the metho. Let's see what happens. So all we do, we get a metho bottle, a spray bottle, and we wax some metho in it. And the first thing we do, we just want a fine mist. We don't want bubbles like that dropping on the surface. So we get it spraying. So it's just putting a fine mist over the surface. And you watch this. And the metho will evaporate off. And I think they're fine bits of timber, just like furry timber sticking up there, what we're seeing there at present. But we'll leave that now. Well, yeah, it's still got a bit to go before it's sticky. So I'll go and do something else, and I'll come back in a little while and we'll whack another coat on that fella. I have 2 containers of acetone, dirty acetone, clean acetone. You put a bit of clean acetone in your mixing cup, Or first off, if you've got plenty of dirty stuff, use the dirty stuff. Put some dirty acetone in your mixing cup, wash it out, then empty that into your dirty container. Don't put it back in your clean one, you'll contaminate it. Then get a bit of clean acetone, use your brush, and give it a clean, and you can keep using the same container and brush all day. And you're not getting it all over your hands. It's a really good way to get maximum use of your containers. I got sidetracked. An hour and a half later, it's almost no longer sticky, so it's almost to what we call green. That's alright. I'm going to throw another coat over the top of that and see how we go. How's that? 2 coats of boat coat, and it's almost no stickiness after the second coat. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let that sit in the sun now and cure off fairly fast. Then I'll take it down on my boat and check it's the size is okay. Then I'll come back and sand it and put at least another coat on it. And I'll probably and that way I can sand it between coats because it's a little bit rough. Looks like the timber's gone a little bit furry. Anyway, after 2 coats, I've let it dry, taken it down to the boat, make sure it's going to fit in place. Now I've given it a sand, and the reason I let it dry and sand it was furry and it was rough finish. So now I've sanded it just a 80 grit, and we'll now give it another coat. We'll add a little bit of acetone to it, I think. No, metho. We'll add a little bit of metho to the boat coat, and you watch, it'll come up looking like varnish. Okay, there's used for another coat of boat coat, full strength, no air bubbles, and because it's on a vertical surface like that, it'll pull out pretty well. So that's looking good. That'll become the bezel for my temperature gauge tomorrow. Once it's cured, I'll cut off, see it's sitting around the bottom, just cut that off with a sharp bladed knife and it'll look beautiful.